the shortest way of describing Beatrice and Virgil is that it's an animal allegory on the Holocaust. Now, I should state where I come from in writing this book. I'm not Jewish, and nor am I of recent European ancestry. My families, both my father's and my mother's side, have been in Quebec in French Canada for over 200 years. So I have absolutely no connection to that great tragedy in Europe. No familial link that I can follow on either side, the victimizers or the victims. So I'm a complete outsider to the Holocaust. Nonetheless, it was a tragedy that, when I first heard about it, stayed with me. I lived 4 years in France as a child. My parents were diplomats, and they were posted at the Canadian Embassy in Paris, and I was between the ages of 8 and 12. And it was there that I was taught the Second World War. Second World War, those of you who've been to France would know, to this day is to be seen on the ground in France. Every single town will have a monument to the war dead. Every single town will have any number of plazas, avenues, streets, named after events or people from the Second World War. So the psychology of war, of having an enemy and going to war against your enemy, made sense. The psychology of the Holocaust didn't. Jews were perfectly integrated in German society. You know, they paid their taxes, they fought in the First World War on the German side, they contributed to every field of German civilization, you know, to the arts, to the sciences, to the politics. Any number of German Nobel Prize winners were Germans, and were Jews. Any number of artists were Jews. Most of the, most of the politicians of the Weimar Republic were Jewish. So they were perfectly integrated in that country. They contributed, for example, the department store was invented by Jews. The idea of assembling all these disparate little shops under one roof was invented by Jews. And some of the great shopping centers, department stores in Berlin, were run by Jews. So in every way they contributed to the German economy, to German civilization. And so to have non-Jewish Germans suddenly turn around and attempt to massacre Jewish Germans seemed to make no sense, because that seemed to be to say, turn around and kill your friends. Now, of course, I had no idea, not having any inkling to participate in that feeling, but I knew nothing about anti-Semitism. I had no reason to hate Jews. I just had never been taught that. It wasn't at all part of my family culture at all. So it was puzzling. Because it was puzzling, it stayed with me. And then as I grew older and I started reading on my own, I started reading. And I think the first book I read on the Holocaust on my own was what still to this day is the best-selling book on the Holocaust. The emblematic text on the Holocaust is a book called The Diary of a Young Girl by Anne Frank. To this day, it's still the best-selling, best-known book on the Holocaust. And with good reason. It takes the 6 million, which is too nebulous, too vague, too overwhelming, and brings it down to one single emblematic figure. And the tragedy of the whole thing is captured very ably in this young girl's brilliant diary. So after that, I kept on regularly reading about the Holocaust. For no reason that I could tell, I was just interested. Because before I was inhibited by this idea that it wouldn't be authentic. If I was going to make the effort of writing a thing that was about the Holocaust, it would involve so much research about getting, how practicing a Jew would my character be? How many Hebrew words would he know or she know? Would they go to the synagogue? What would be their relationship to Judaism? Where would they live? What language would they speak? All these things didn't frankly interest me. Whereas if I used an obviously literary device, such as using animals, suddenly it was of no concern anymore. Clearly it's a literary device. Clearly my attempt was to do something different. And that suddenly liberated me, and so I moved ahead, and I started doing my research. And then one of the things that I noticed nearly right away it's funny, at the same time as I was liberated by my choice of using animals, at the same time I sort of staggered to a stop, because I suddenly realized something which I'd never realized before in all my reading on the Holocaust, all my viewing of movies, and that is that our portrayal of the Holocaust, how we think of the Holocaust, how we access that historical event of 60 years ago, is by and large dominated by non-fiction. When we think of the Holocaust, we don't necessarily think of novels. We think either of the memoirs of survivors, like Elie Wiesel or Primo Levi, or we think of the works of great historians. I noticed that there's very few books that are truly fictional. And by that I mean, you know, what a novel is. A novel is, you know, Moby Dick, for example. You know, there are no big fat white whales out there. You know, novels where characters are invented, situations are invented, everything's invented, but nonetheless to tell something that is psychologically, morally true. So in other words, artful lies to tell in a very concise, powerful way a truth about the human condition. That kind of process very rarely appears with the Holocaust. So in no way is it a factual account. It was more my attempt to look at that monstrous mountain of bodies and see what can my imagination say about this. Because usually what happens with events like that is we go into this witness mode. We go into very fact-based, detail-based accounting, and we chew away the imagination. And let's get back to the New York Times critic who hated it. It was very odd for me to read a literary critic, a professional reader, say that we can use allegory, we can use metaphor on anything else in life, really, rape, environmental destruction, war, anything you want, but not the Holocaust. To have a critic disempower herself of the very tools that she applies every day, or reads about every single day, was very, very odd. And I can't think of any other historical event that is so frightened away the use of metaphor and the imagination. And I think it's important to apply the imagination to the Holocaust, even in ways that we might think are shocking, because my artistic hypothesis in writing this book is that history will only last if in some ways we turn it into art.